Today we're going to be looking at a mouse made by a company famous for making computer coolers. This is the MG510 by Deepcool. It's a wireless esports-focused gaming mouse meant to take on the likes of Razer with their Viper Ultimate and Logitech with their G Pro X Superlight and their G Pro Wireless. Now, you know how normally if you want to kind of catch up to the competition, you just kind of copy what the competition is doing, usually the leaders, in this case Logitech and Razer? Well, Deepcool pretty much did exactly that because the design of this thing is basically a G Pro Wireless and Viper Ultimate in one. It's like those two mice had a baby and gave birth to this thing. It's got the same main profile where if you look at it from the side, it basically has the hump back of the G Pro Wireless. But if you look at it from the front, it has a very similar mouse design and shape to the Viper Ultimate, except this is a little bit more bubbly or rounded off. The Viper Ultimate is a much sharper and more angular looking mouse. Build quality on the Deepcool though is way better than the Viper Ultimate. The plastics on the Viper are pretty okay, like it's, a little bit rough plastics, but I like it. It doesn't feel really that cheap, but it does feel hollow, whereas the Deepcool feels much more solid and much more dense, and that has something to do with the weight, which we'll get to later. But this just feels like a better built mouse, and it really shows with the button presses, because when you click on the buttons on this one, you don't get that little creaking and rattling that the Viper Ultimate does when you push the mouse too hard and towards the middle, which can happen in very tense gaming situations. Take a listen. That sound you hear on the Viper Ultimate isn't just sound, it actually does hinder your gaming experience because when you push it too hard, again in tense situations, it is actually a lot harder to push the mouse button down, which is a bad thing. None of that is present with the Deepcool, which is nice being that it's $80, which means it's quite a bit cheaper than the Razer and a lot cheaper than the G Pro Superlight. It's also easier to press the left and right mouse buttons. I measured about 50 grams of force with my very unscientific food scale, and when I used the Viper and the G Pro X Superlight, those were about 58 grams. They were pretty much identical to each other, but that's about, 15 or so percent more pressure than the Deepcool, so another benefit here for the Deepcool. Now in terms of the size and usability of the mouse is 124 millimeters long, 65 millimeters wide, and 39 millimeters high or tall. So it's almost identical to the Logitech G Pro Wireless and G Pro X Superlight, but the Razer is still a lower mouse, having like a Lamborghini Aventador kind of profile to it. So this Deepcool is more traditional in style, again resembling the G Pro X Superlight and also the Model O Wireless or the Model O Wired if you're familiar with those mice. And to give you some perspective on how it feels on my hand, I can palm or claw grip this no problem, but I can't fingertip grip it because my hands are not so large, they're more medium sized, and this mouse is quite long. So unless you got large hands, you're not going to be able to fingertip grip this thing. Now, in terms of the design is ambidextrous, but it only has left side buttons. So technically it's a right-handed mouse, but nothing would prevent you from being able to unbind the left side buttons and use it on your left hand if you're a lefty. It also has PTFE feet, just like the Viper Ultimate and Superlight, but this one felt to be the smoothest. Now, I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that my G Pro X Superlight is basically as old as it was when it first came out, and same thing with the Viper Ultimate, but regardless, this one feels smoother than any of the top-tier esports gaming mice that I currently use. It also has a sensor that feels just as good and accurate as any of the other top-tier gaming mice that I use. It has a PAW3370 optical sensor, which I'm not entirely sure how that stacks up in terms of a technical standpoint, but what I can say in terms of esports level gaming, this feels super good, responsive, almost no input lag, there's no smoothing, acceleration, it's just basically another Superlight or Viper Ultimate with kind of that hybrid design. Battery life is also just as good. Well, maybe, I'm not entirely sure. So Deepcool claims that it has a 36-hour battery life on their website, but I've been using it for about a week for at least 8 hours a day, and I still have half a battery, and that's probably due to the fact that I don't use the LEDs because the LEDs on this mouse are ugly. They're just bad. One of the worst I've ever seen, because if you have any kind of moving effect, there's no gradients or smooth transition from one color to the next. It looks just really cheap and ugly. And if you also look at it from like a different angle than what you're supposed to, which whatever supposed to is supposed to be, basically you're just not going to see the LED filling in the whole kind of plastic cutout for the shine through. It's just not that good. So personally, I left the LED off the entire time, which basically increased battery life, but I would also like to see a version of this mouse where there's no LED at all to make the weight a little bit lighter, because it's 85 grams, which Deepcool does advertise 83 on their website, but my scale was showing 85, and I did verify other mice to see if it was reporting accurately. It was, so this is about 2 grams heavier than what Deepcool advertises. But again, I would still like to see a no LED version to make this, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 grams, however much lighter it's going to be without the LED, because it doesn't look good, and also lighter is better, and plus better battery life. It's not like we're looking at the LEDs all the time when we're playing games, so personally I don't care about RGB in my mouse, but that's just a me thing. You guys might feel differently. Now, one thing that I do appreciate is that this mouse does have a USB-C port, none of that micro USB garbage. Still kind of sad that Logitech doesn't have USB-C on their top tier gaming mice, and Razer, well, they really haven't updated their mouse for USB-C, so whatever, kind of bonus points here for the Deepcool. One thing that isn't as nice is the whole software situation that's built into the mouse. Now, it does have software that you can download to adjust whatever you need to in this mouse. It's pretty robust, has a lot of kind of customization, polling rate up to 1000 hertz, which they call esports for whatever reason. It's just 1000 hertz is standard. But what's weird is the default settings that they decided on for this mouse. For some reason, improved pointer precision is on by default. And no, this is not the same improved pointer precision that you have on Windows. When you check this box on or off, it's separate from Windows. So if you think you have it off on Windows and you feel some kind of acceleration and you have this mouse, well, that's because you do have acceleration, because for some reason that's the default. Why is this the default, Deepcool? If this is a gaming focused mouse, this should be off, not on. Another weird decision is what they did with this button on the top behind the scroll wheel. You'd be forgiven if you thought that it was a DPI switch, but it's not. It's your RGB effect switch. How many times am I going to change my RGB effect? That should be the DPI adjust switch, if anything, but no, that's on the bottom of the mouse for whatever reason. Weird thing number 3 is that the default polling rate is 250 hertz. Why? This should be 1000 hertz by default. If it's a gaming focused mouse, then it should be gaming focused by default. What are we doing here? Luckily, everything that I just mentioned is changeable through the software, so it's not really detrimental to the functionality of this mouse. Like, it's not like you can't change it. You can, it's just you just have to set it up before really using it. Another thing that also confused me about the software is that there's a mouse sensitivity slider. Now, this isn't a mouse sensitivity slider like DPI. There is its own section to adjust how many DPI settings you want and to adjust the DPI for each setting. What this is it's basically their own version of Windows cursor speed. So you know how in the Windows settings you have 1 through 11? Well, here I think it's like 1 through 20, but it's their own, and it makes no sense why it's there. I don't know why it's there, but it's there. If you can find a reason why, hey, you can maybe tell me. Maybe I'm just being short-sighted, I have no idea, but I had no reason to use it, found no reason why I should. Now, before I conclude and tell you if this mouse is worth getting, we gotta talk about the wireless situation. It uses a 2.4 gigahertz wireless dongle, no Bluetooth, which is perfectly fine because the dongle is a much more stable connection, but it's not the best. It's not like G Pro X Superlight level or Viper Ultimate Super level. Those basically never have any hiccups, interruptions, issues, no matter where I place it, whether it's behind my computer or line of sight in my USB hub, which is to the front right of my desk, kind of like I'm showing you right now. It's pretty close. It's about a feet and a half away from my mouse, and it has line of sight. But there are some times where I have some kind of dropouts. It's very light, very kind of random, and it doesn't happen very often. It's like 0.1% of the time. But it's enough to where if I'm playing competitively, it's like I don't want to have that dropout. If you only want to use wireless, this is the reason why you want to spend a little bit more to get the Razer Viper Ultimate, or spend a lot more to get the G Pro X Superlight, because, well, 1, it's lighter, but 2, those mice have much more stable connections, and you never have to worry about if it has line of sight or if it's ever going to drop out, because they won't. I'm not sure what it is about these companies like Deepcool, Glorious, and any other company that's basically undercutting the G Pro X Superlight, but every time they have these wireless mice, yes, it's great, but they always have this same wireless issue. I'm not sure why. Now, you can put it in wired mode. It comes with this very nice power corded like light braided cable, but there's no included bungee, so you're gonna have to get your own kind of bungee because cables add more weight, in this case about an extra 3 grams, and also adds drag. So if you're buying this, you're probably buying it because it's wireless, not because you wanna plug the wire in and use it all the time, because you can find other mice that are wired that are lighter and do the exact same thing and probably a little bit cheaper. So I just wish that these mice would have the same kind of stable 2.4 gigahertz connection that the Logitechs and Razers of the world do, but they don't, and hopefully they will, because this is a great price. You know, having basically a G Pro X Superlight, well, more like G Pro Wireless because it's about the same weight as the non-Superlight version, but half the price. Like, this is a really good deal. If you don't mind dealing with that connection issue, then yeah, it's fine. $80 for a mouse like this, really solid, and it's definitely a better option than the Glorious Model O wireless because that had a major issue with the wireless connection no matter how close I got it. Even though I had the wireless extension where I could put the dongle right in front of the mouse, which by the way this Deepcool does have, and it does fix that connection issue that I mentioned. I just don't do it because I like my desk clean. But this doesn't have that issue like the Glorious Model O, where basically anything you do in your computer, like dragging files, can completely destroy the connection between the mouse and the dongle. I have no clue why the Glorious did that, but this doesn't have that issue. And overall, for about the same price as the Glorious and half the price of a G Pro X Superlight or G Pro Wireless, I'd say this is a really good mouse. Just, again, 0.1%. If you want to deal with that, there you go. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you disliked it, leave a dislike. Consider subscribing so I can have a higher subscriber count. It also helps the channel. Also comment which one do you think is going to be best. What are you going to get if you're going to get any of these? G Pro X Superlight, G Pro Wireless, Viper Ultimate, Deepcool MG510, Glorious Model O Wireless. Don't get the Glorious. It's bad. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And as always, have a great day every day. Peace.